Hey investor friends, I'm Michelle Markey and it's September 2021, which brings pumpkin spice in our beverages, apple picking so we can make apple pie and strudel, and the potential end of the mega backdoor Roth IRA tax loophole, which could be the end of retirement savings as we know it. Just kidding. That was added for dramatic effect, but in all seriousness, the amount of proposed tax changes could affect not only the rich and wealthy, but also everyday people like you and myself. And for those of us who have not yet achieved financial freedom, myself included, this could put a little bit of a wrench in our plans toward financial freedom. So I'll explain what could potentially affect everyday people and also what things affect more of those who are wealthier and may have more income coming in. And just to point out a little bit of a difference, income means that you're bringing money into your household. So maybe it's earned income from your job or business. And this is different from wealth, which is having savings or assets, and it's a store of your money. So having assets and being wealthy could be very different from bringing in a lot of money from your job. So just want to make sure everybody knows the difference between income and wealth. And also, if you like preparing for your financial future as much as I do, I'd love if you could please like and subscribe to my video and YouTube channel, because I'm trying to help us be as prepared as possible no matter what tax changes happen. Thanks. In order to explain how the picture for saving up for retirement could change, I'll explain some background information on the existing retirement accounts and how all of these could be affected with some of the proposed tax changes. And they involve the traditional individual retirement account, or IRA, as well as the after-tax version of this known as the Roth IRA, as well as a 401k, which is an employer defined contribution workplace retirement plan, could also be affected. And there's also an after-tax and pre-tax version of a 401k. So if it's after-tax, it's a Roth 401k, and if it's pre-tax, then it's just a normal 401k. And so a lot of people can contribute to any of these types of accounts. And if you earn too much money, then you might be phased out of a Roth IRA. So if you make up to $124,000 as a single person, you can contribute $6,000 if you're under 50 to a Roth IRA, or $7,000 if you're over 50 to a Roth IRA. And then if you make too much money, like you're totally phased out at $140,000, so you can still contribute $6,000 or $7,000 to a regular IRA with no income limit. So that's one way that people who earn more than 140K could still contribute to an IRA. And then you could roll that over and convert it in a backdoor Roth IRA conversion if you wanted to then grow your money tax-free and then not have required minimum distributions in a Roth IRA when you're older. So if you wanted to get out of the traditional IRA, it's been relatively easy to date. And this is all potentially about to change in a massive way. And then there's also the 401k. And so normally, if you're under 50, you can contribute up to $19,500 to this. And if you're over 50, you can contribute $26,000 to this in 2021. And then your employer can contribute $38,500 for a total of up to $58,000 if you're under 50, and up to $64,500 if you're over 50 in a 401k. And if you do this in an after-tax kind of way, then you could roll this over in what's known as the mega backdoor Roth IRA conversion, because this gives you the most amount that you could roll over as long as you don't have a salary above $290,000. And this is what is the biggest that's at stake, and doesn't just affect people who make massive amounts of money, but also everyday people like you and myself. So let's say you work at an employer and you're trying to save up as much as possible, and then you want to grow your earnings tax-free by converting an after-tax 401k into a Roth IRA eventually. This is the way to do it. And so if this gets affected with some of these proposed changes from the House Committee on Ways and Means, then this means that some of us may not be able to take advantage of this current ability to be able to roll over after-tax contributions in a Roth 401k into a Roth IRA. And to me, this is the biggest deal of all. And just to be clear, I strive to be neutral, so none of this is political commentary, and I'm not trying to stoke any FUD or fear, uncertainty, and doubt. but I try to look at objectively what's happening and also how things could be affected with corporations and families. And we could be seeing corporations with an increased tax hike, as well as how there could be changes to capital gains taxes, as well as how I understand that the government wants to be able to afford its $3.5 trillion budget plan that could benefit a lot of people by raising taxes. So all of this is something that we need to keep in mind. And for the most part, a lot of people are probably not going to be affected if you're not among the top 1.8% earning $400,000 or more per year. And chances are none of this is such a big deal to you. But for those of us who wanted to try to maximize our retirement investing through especially 401ks, this might be putting a little bit of a wrinkle in our plan. So we just got to prepare. I always think it's helpful to cite from the official government documentation. So just like I would go to the SEC for 10K annual reports, I went to the waysandmeans.house.gov website and pulled up the specific language about some of these proposed changes, which include how if you're a single taxpayer earning at least 400K or married filing jointly earning at least 450K, then you wouldn't be able to convert your non-deductible contributions, or also known as after-tax contributions, from a traditional IRA into a Roth IRA starting after December 31, 2031. So you have at least 10 years if this goes into law before you would have to worry about not being able to do any distributions, transfers, or contributions from a traditional IRA into a Roth IRA. But the thing that worries me more is that regardless of our income level, if we want to roll over any after-tax contributions to an IRA or a workplace retirement plan like a 401k, then we wouldn't be able to roll any of that over into a Roth IRA after December 31, 2021, which is in a few months from now. So if we hope to have any of our Roth money in a 401k converted into a Roth IRA, then that would behoove some of us to have to do that this year, or else it would probably be stuck in maybe a 401k, and then we would have to live with getting required minimum distributions starting at age 72, which for many of us could be over 40 to 50 years away from now. But to me, it still meant something, being able to grow my earnings in an after-tax kind of way in a tax advantage retirement account. So to me, this kind of bums me out, but I'm willing to live with whatever happens if it comes to pass. And then starting next year in 2022, if you're someone who makes 400K or more, or you plan to be, then if the total value of your investments across a traditional IRA, Roth IRA, or 401k amounts to $10 million, then you would no longer be able to contribute to a Roth and or traditional IRA. And also the next one is what I consider to be Peter Thiel Rule Part 1, which is if you have a value across your IRAs and defined contribution plan or 401k of $20 million or more, then you would need to start distributing that money in excess from your Roth IRA. And so that's something to keep in mind if you're in that kind of position. And then what I consider to be Peter Thiel Rule Part 2 is where accredited investors who have certain minimums of income and assets or education like special licenses and credentials wouldn't be able to keep securities in IRAs anymore. And this probably came about because Peter Thiel's startup founder shares in PayPal that were maybe worth $2,000 decades ago became a value of $5 billion in 2019. And so if this rule comes into effect, then his Roth IRA would only be able to keep maybe $20 million in it, and he would have to distribute the rest. And then not all people who have massive amounts in their Roth IRAs had startup founder shares like Peter Thiel. People like investor of Berkshire Hathaway, Ted Weschler, has $264 million in his Roth IRA that he grew from compounding his contributions over time. So not everybody ended up the way that Peter Thiel did with massive amounts. And even if they have millions or billions of dollars in their Roth IRAs, it doesn't look like they'll be able to keep it. And at most, they'll be able to maybe keep $20 million in them. There seems to be a few potential action steps you could consider taking if you don't want Uncle Sam to slam the tax door in your face. And one of them would be if you have made any non-deductible or after-tax contributions to a traditional IRA, it would be in your better interest to probably move that over into a Roth IRA if you want it to be as tax advantage as possible, as well as if you have any after-tax or Roth contributions in a workplace 401k, then you may want to see if you can try to roll that over into a Roth IRA as soon as possible. And maybe you might not be able to do that if you're still working for that employer. So definitely check with your brokerage that offers the 401k to see if you can move it over this year before you don't have that much of a chance in 2022. And this could just be wishful thinking on my part and how I'm reading the proposed rule changes, but maybe you can still contribute pre-tax or deductible contributions to a 401k and or IRA, and then maybe you can still convert that into a Roth over the next 10 years, or else why else would they put in the rules that after 2031, then people making over 400k wouldn't be able to do any more conversions from an IRA or 401k. And so maybe that's possible, but I'm not hanging my hat on it because of how it said that regardless of people's incomes, that after tax monies can't be rolled over into a Roth IRA. So maybe we have to say goodbye to the backdoor possibilities for good. Even though normally December 31 is supposed to be New Year's Eve and a time of celebration, this year it might just incite some panic as a lot of people are trying to roll over funds if that is really the deadline. And so who knows what will happen, but we know that Congress is still in session for the current year of 2021, so they have until pretty much the end of the year, I guess, to pass the proposed changes. But we'll see, because if any of these proposed changes were to go into effect, it would have to first be approved in the House, and then it would have to be approved in the Senate before the president then signs it into law. So let's see what shakes out. And if you enjoyed this video or learned something, please like and subscribe. And I wish you well on your journey to being the best investor you can be. Till next time.